Hi, everyone. Ted Wyman here with another edition of Jet Setting. I'm joined by Paul Friesen and Scott Billick today to talk about the Winnipeg Jets, the start to their season, and an elephant in the room, perhaps. The Jets' attendance to start the season at Canada Life Center. Not very impressive, and just over 11,000 there for the game against Los Angeles Kings on Tuesday night. Lowest attendance since the Jets came to Winnipeg in 2011 from Atlanta. Boy, that one does not look good. Paul Friesen, what are your thoughts on what you've seen so far? No sellout, the no sellout in the home opener, and then a much lower attendance in the second game.
Yeah, the home opener one surprised me almost as much as the last night. Yeah, kind of shocked, to be honest with you, because remember last April, the Jets announced their Forever Winnipeg campaign. They billed it as the largest season ticket campaign since the team returned in 2011. The goal was to get more businesses to buy season tickets, and we don't know their season ticket numbers, but clearly it hasn't worked. Off to a worse start. Last year they averaged at least 14,000. What was their home opener crowd? Was it 12 and a half? I'm not sure.
13, 4, 10, I believe.
Okay. So now they're,
it's still 2,000 short.
These are pretty good draws they should have had here. I mean, home opener is always a draw. And
it's against Paul Maurice in Florida, right? Like,
sure. Yeah. Not that you go to watch a coach, but yeah. And then last night with Pierre-Luc Dubois coming back, yeah, all kinds of good storylines there with the LA Kings, a good Western Conference team. Vegas on Thursday will be interesting. If that one can't get you in, if you can't get 15 for that, boy, what's going on in mid-February? When Arizona comes to town, so yeah, I'm surprised at the numbers, and it's clearly their campaign fell flat this past summer. Don't know the answers. Maybe we'll hear some answers from the organization later, but I don't know the answers. And the team hasn't even had a chance to make an impression yet. We don't know yet how good this team's going to be.
Yeah.
They had two good games to start the year, right? Play well both times. They came up with one stinker now out of three. That's sure no way to get those. Maybe it's good they only had 11 and change, because not too many people saw a bad game live. Maybe it won't turn off as many.
Well, I hate to say it, but this reminds me of Winnipeg Jets 1.0. It reminds me of the way things would go with that organization in terms of their attendance. There wasn't very good attendance prior to Christmas back in the day. And then it would start to pick up as the season went along. Some doldrums in January, as you mentioned already, Paul. But, you just wonder. The economy is not great. Food prices are through the roof. Maybe people just aren't willing to spend their money on this right now, but that does not bode well for this organization. Scott, what are your thoughts on what's transpired here? Why the people aren't showing up?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, right? You're coming off of two pretty disappointing seasons, one very disappointing season from a Jets perspective, if in 21-22, where, it was just miserable the whole year for the most part. They missed the playoffs. Mark Scheifele's questioning whether he wants to be in town. That intensified a little more last year in terms of, guys saying they don't want to be a part of a rebuild. I think there's a bit of a element here too, that at least up until Scheifele and Hellebuyck kind of re-signed, I think if you're a fan kind of looking on, you're like, is anybody really committed here? How, and so you think about that part, and then you think about, well, if you're a fan, do you really want to commit your money to a team that doesn't seem, some players just don't seem committed to be here or whatever. And that's obviously, that happened before, those two guys resigned and all that. I think at the end of last season, Kevin Cheveldayoff got up there, spoke for, I think it was 42 minutes, if I recall correctly, and really didn't provide much of anything. I think at that time, Kevin Cheveldayoff had a chance to really kind of show something to the fan base, a vision of what this team looked like going forward, and that failed. And so, you head into the summer then at that point, and if you're a fan, I mean, if you don't know where this team's going, you don't know if it's going to be good or bad, and you're thinking about spending $400 to go out on a night, take your family or whatever, are you really going to take it to a Jets game when you're just not, you don't have a lot of faith in what you're watching or whatever? You just don't know if the team's going to put in an honest day's work.
But that
At
perception
times.
maybe changed a bit, right, in the summer when the trade for
I,
3 players. So
I think
slowly that
so.
perception began to change, and maybe
I
they
think so, yeah. But I think at the same time, I mean, you have, I think, I think for a while there, and we heard the horror stories of people trying to get a hold of their season ticket reps, and just nobody was really getting back to them, and so people just whatever, if they don't care about us, we don't, we're not gonna re-up our season tickets. You hear a lot of people that have given up their season tickets. They don't think there's value for money there. I mean, these are all anecdotal things, but it's clear by 11,226 people that their season ticket numbers, the last that I heard, it was that number is around 12,000 in terms of season ticket holders. Last night proved that it's nowhere close to that. Now you're starting to wonder, is it, where is it at? You got to you have to assume that last night there was obviously walk-up tickets. There was the people that buy into the packages, people that just buy single game tickets early on in the season, that sort of thing. So how low really is that season ticket number, right? I mean, can we assume 2,000 people bought tickets? Like, is it below 10,000 now? Like, again, I think there's a lot of questions right now about what's going on with this organization, what's going on. And there's very few answers. When's the last time Mark Chipman talked to anybody about this? And so you wonder, at some point, is that coming? Like, I mean, there was the whole veiled threat at the end of last season too, right? Or maybe it wasn't even at the end of last season, but it was, it takes all of us. I think it was the quote, something like that, and which was, and then they kind of, I think they even showed the footage of the team leaving in '96. Yeah, I mean, you covered this extensively, Freezer. So, and so I just, it's just a lot of maybe missteps or steps just not taken sometimes. And I think there's people, and again, this is anecdotally, but I mean, there's a lot of people that send emails or DMs on social media or whatever, and they're just disappointed in the organization or the product on the ice or the prices. Some people just have they don't have the discretionary income to pay for a ticket, and tickets are expensive, and they have to be. I mean, I think the realities here too are tickets still have to be a reasonable price here. This is one of the smallest arenas in the league, outside of Arizona. It's the smallest, I believe. And so that you have to make up that ticket revenue somewhere. Yeah, and so yeah, like I think there's problems on both sides, right? Like, at the end of the day, True North and the Jets, they need people to buy tickets, right? That's where the biggest revenue comes from, and the gates and all that is what they need. This is why they pushed for the playoffs last year. It's why this team doesn't want to do a rebuild, because they need that playoff revenue, even if it's only 2 games like it was last year. I mean, that's a lot of money, especially with you add in the TV money. So it's a complex situation. I don't think it's I don't think you can't look. I don't think you can look at other organizations or markets and kind of compare the two directly, because there's different factors. But yeah, it's I don't think it's dire yet either. But I think it's getting to a point where it's not rebounding the way that this team had kind of hoped it would, especially as Paul said earlier, the way that they kind of went into the summer with this big season ticket drive and all that. They have all these new packages and stuff, and they just did all these renos to the arena, hoping that all of these things together would kind of bring fans back. Less fans are at the games now. Fewer fans are at the games now than ever before, and that's quite telling, I suppose.
All right. Well, Paul, as you said, we don't know too much yet about what the identity of this Winnipeg Jets team is, but they had their first 2 games of the season. They lost to Calgary. They beat Florida, but they had, they actually played pretty well in those 2 games. I thought that was a pretty good product that they put on the ice. There was a lot of entertainment. There was a lot of engagement Mark Scheifele was certainly looking very good coming off of his initial contract. They certainly had a dud against the LA Kings on Tuesday night. Not every game is going to be perfect, obviously, but I thought there was a lot of promise early on. What's your take on what you've seen just from a few games?
Yeah, like you said, promising. But then last night's dud. I mean, when you throw one of those in, you could play well and lose, right? But when you toss up a real dud like that, and in that kind of situation, Pierre-Luc Dubois' return, you get the three Kings on your side playing their old team for the first time. So it had some special feelings for a lot of players, and to play. I mean, they came out of the gates pretty well, right? They had a pretty good first 10 minutes for sure. Probably should have scored one early, but then their response when they got down was not what you want. I'd be concerned a little bit about that response. But like you say, it's early. They've played two good games out of three. We can analyze each one to death, I guess, if we wanted to. But to do that at home,
That's what we do.
As we do, yeah. To do that at home, it's one thing to do it on the fourth of 5 games on the road or something, but to do it at home, well rested, concerning, an early red flag, but one you can easily yank out of the ground with some good games.
Yeah. At least, as you said, there weren't that many people there to see it. But, it did seem, Scott, in your analysis piece, you suggested that the wind kind of came out of the Jets' sails after the injury to Gabe Vilardi. That was pretty early in the game, but there's no doubt that power play didn't seem as
snappy.
The power play not effective, but as you say, it was pretty snappy. They were making great passes. They were moving around so well. They were getting a lot of shots. When you take Vilardi out of there, all of a sudden now Rasmus Kupari's in there. He's never even played on the power play before. It didn't seem to work as well. So do you think that played a big role? And honestly, we don't know the extent of this injury to Vilardi, but that really could upset the apple cart with this team a bit, couldn't it? I mean, they seem to have a pretty nice setup with 4 lines, but how far do they go beyond that?
Well, I think you can just look to the way that they tried to fill that hole last night with Nemestikov and then Ehlers, and you're like, none of these are really working, right? It's just, part of that is you're double shifting guys. Guys are, haven't really played in that spot all season, but, everybody talks about this next man up mentality. And well, last night, it just didn't work out, right? Yeah, it's interesting. I like, you wonder what the actual human kind of toll an injury to a big name on your team takes when it happens. Like when you see a guy go down and it didn't look good. He was clutching his knee. He got up pretty quick, but he couldn't put any weight on it after his initial kind of getting off the ice. Like Nikolai Ehlers talked about a little last night after the game, kind of saying that, it's not. You don't want to say that you don't want to make an excuse or whatever, but like there is some legitimacy to the idea that it takes it takes the wind out of the sails of a team when you see a teammate go down like that. And I think there's worry for both, obviously for the player himself and for what it means for your team, because I think this team came out of the gates in the first 2 games and they were really good. Right? Like, I mean, they didn't win in Calgary, but they probably should have. I mean, they were dominant in that game. You look at all the analytics, you look at everything, the shot totals. They just didn't put the puck in the net, and Connor Hellebuyck didn't save a lot of shots when it mattered in that game, and Jacob Markstrom did. But you look at those first 2 games, you're like, I mean, this Jets team could be really good if they just keep playing this way, right? And that's it's a tough ask to also play that style of game for 82 games. And so, was last night or was Tuesday night against LA was that a sign that this team maybe doesn't have the ability to kind of keep that kind of pressure up? Or was it, one of your teammates goes down early in the game and it just throws everything out of whack, and then Cole Perfetti gets hit from behind in the second period and Dylan Sandberg jumps in, and now he's gone for 17 minutes because he gets the instigator, the fighting major, and the 10-minute misconduct. So now you're playing with 5D for the rest, for a large, pretty much most of the rest of the game. And so, like, you wonder, like, I mean, is it just a one-off? Like, what was it? Just a bad game, and things kind of snowballed from the Velarde injury on, because the Jets were leading in shots 9-3. They came out of the gate against LA well, right? So yeah, it's interesting, right? I mean, we're not going to know until they play Vegas on Thursday, I guess, whether it was a one-off, but we're also going to find out today what the extent of Gabe Velarde's injury, sorry, is. And so, yeah, I mean, it's early season adversity. It reminds me of a last season with Nikolai Ehlers, and him going down in the second game of the year, and then he wasn't back for more than half a year, obviously, but yeah, we'll see. I mean, this is a big test for this team, because I think they were feeling it. They was clicking. The power play was working really well, even though they weren't scoring necessarily. Rick Bowness always talks about momentum and giving momentum. Well, the power play was certainly giving this team momentum just by all the chances they were generating. So it's this is an early season test for I don't want to call it a young team, but a newly formed team that really seemed to have all the gears kind of greased the right way. And so we're going to find out what I guess what they're made of in a sense.
All right, well, we should wrap it up here, but I did want to say that Connor Hellebuyck has not had a very good start to this. He's got a .843 save percentage in 3 games, has given up at least 4 goals in each of them, and 5 last night. I mean, that's not really the start you're looking for from a guy who's been a Vezina candidate 3 times, has been a Vezina winner, and just signed this 7-year contract. You can be pretty sure it's going to get better, but I do think that this team brought in Laurent Brossoit for a reason. It's not just to be your regular backup. I think they wanted to get him a little more playing time, and I think it's probably time to get him in, probably against his old team against Vegas. And honestly, give him a chance, because he's a pretty good goalie. I'm not saying let him take over, but if Hellebuyck's struggling, and I don't think he's been good, maybe there's an option there for a couple of games. Anyways, fellas, thanks very much. Appreciate your insights today. That's Scott Billeck and Paul Friesen. I'm Ted Wyman. You've been watching Jet Setting on WinnipegSun.com.